Serena Voss did not cry when the Alpha King rejected her. She wanted to. The tears were there, sitting right behind her eyes like something heavy pressing against glass. But she kept her face still. She kept her chin up. She walked out of the great hall in her white ceremony dress, and she did not look back. The door closed behind her. No one followed. She stood in the corridor for a moment, listening to the sound of the celebration starting again inside. Music. Laughter. The king had made his choice, and the court had moved on in less than 3 minutes. That was how long it took the world to forget her. 3 minutes. She walked out of the palace alone. The night was cold. Serena had no coat, no bag, no plan. She had spent every gold coin she owned on the ceremony dress, because her mother told her it mattered. "Look the part," her mother had said. "If you look like you belong, maybe he will believe it too." She walked into the forest at the edge of the capital city. She did not know where she was going. She just needed to move, because if she stopped moving, she was afraid she would sit down and never get up. She walked for 3 days. She slept under trees. She drank from streams. She ate nothing. By the 3rd morning, her legs gave out at the edge of a valley she had never seen before, and she fell in the mud, with her white dress ruined around her, and she thought, quite simply, "This is it." A voice above her said, "Good bones." She looked up. An old woman was standing over her, looking down with dark, calm eyes. She was small and silver-haired, and she did not look afraid of anything. "Can you stand?" the old woman asked. "No," Serena said honestly. "Try anyway." She tried. She stood. The old woman's name was Elder Mara, and she had been the leader of the Crimson Hollow Pack for 40 years. She brought Serena inside, fed her, and asked no questions that night. In the morning, she poured 2 cups of tea and sat across the table and said, "You can stay here, but you will work. You will not be carried." Serena wrapped both hands around her cup. "What kind of work?" "The kind that changes you," Mara said. "The kind most people quit." Serena nodded. "Tell me where to start." The first year was the hardest thing she had ever done. She was not a fighter when she arrived. She was not a leader. She was a girl from a disgraced Omega Pack who knew how to be quiet and stay out of the way. Those skills were not useless, Mara told her that, but they were not enough. She learned to track animals through the forest, reading signs in bent grass and broken bark. She learned to negotiate, sitting across from suppliers and traders who tried to take advantage of her youth and her gender, and learning slowly, through failure and embarrassment, how to hold a room. She learned to read people, not just their words, but the small movements beneath their words, the pause before an answer, the way eyes moved when a lie was forming. She failed constantly in those early months. She misread situations. She trusted the wrong people. She made promises she could not keep, and spent long, exhausted nights figuring out how to repair the damage. Mara never scolded her for failing. She only asked one question every time. "What did you learn?" Serena always had an answer. That was the thing. She was not naturally brilliant. She was not gifted in any obvious way, but she was absolutely, almost frighteningly willing to learn. By the end of the 2nd year, the traders stopped trying to cheat her. By the end of the 3rd, they started coming to her for advice. By the 5th year, Serena Voss was the Luna of the Crimson Hollow, the only pack in 3 centuries to exist and thrive without a ruling alpha. Mara had stepped back quietly, without ceremony, and handed her everything. Not because she was the strongest wolf in the hollow, because she was the right one. The Crimson Hollow was known across 6 territories, not feared in the way a monster is feared, but in the way a storm is feared, with respect, and a clear understanding that it was better not to be standing in its path. Serena never stopped thinking about the king, but she stopped needing him to think about her. Those were 2 very different things. The distance between them was where she had built her life. The threat came in the 5th autumn. A coalition of rogue packs, backed by a powerful faction within the Dark Court, had begun moving through the outer territories like a slow fire. They did not attack all at once. They were too clever for that. They worked through alliances, through whispers, through promises made to smaller packs who were tired of being small. One by one, the Alpha King's outer alliances began to crumble. Kael Dravan sat in his war council and watched the map on the table fill with losses marked in red. His advisors argued. His generals proposed strategies. His court grew louder and more frightened with each passing week. And then one of his oldest advisors, a quiet man named Aldrich who had served 3 kings, placed his hand flat on the table and said one thing. There is one pack the enemy has not touched, has not tried to touch. In 6 months of campaign, they have moved around it the way water moves around a stone. The room went quiet. Crimson Hollow, Aldrich said. The name sat on the table like a word from another language. Everyone in the room understood what it meant. And everyone in the room, without saying it aloud, understood something else. The Luna of the Crimson Hollow had once been brought to this very palace to stand before this very king. Feodravon said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Send word." Serena received the king's message on a Tuesday morning. She read it once, set it down on the table, and poured herself a second cup of tea. One of her wolves, a young woman named Petra, watched her from across the room. "What are you going to do?" Serena drank her tea. "I'm going to go." "Because you want to help him?" "Because the threat is real," Serena said simply, "and I protect what matters. That includes innocent people who happen to live in his territory." She did not say anything else about the king. She rode into the capital 6 days later with 12 of her wolves behind her. No announcement, no ceremony flag, no horns. She had not sent word of when she would arrive, which meant the crowds that gathered in the streets did so because word had traveled faster than she had, which told her something useful about how much had changed. People knew her name now. She entered the throne room the way she entered every room she had earned the right to enter, directly, without apology, without performance. She was dressed in deep charcoal gray, no jewelry, her dark hair pulled back simply. 12 years of ceremony culture had taught her one thing. The person who needed the least amount of decoration usually had the most to back it up. Feodravon stood when she entered. She was not sure if it was courtesy or instinct. From the slight surprise on his face, she suspected he was not sure either. She did not bow. She looked at him for exactly as long as she needed to, taking in what 5 years had done to his face, the lines that had not been there before, the weight behind his eyes, the way he held himself like a man carrying something very heavy very carefully. Then she took a seat at the council table and said, "What terms are you prepared to offer?" The room forgot to breathe. The negotiation lasted 3 days. Serena was patient in a way that unsettled people who expected emotion. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She simply stated what she required, and waited, with absolute stillness, for the other side to understand she was not going to move. Her terms were clear. Equal standing at every war council, full autonomy over Crimson Hollow in all matters, permanently, with no future claim from the crown. And one more thing, a formal document, witnessed and sealed by every council member present, acknowledging that the Crimson Hollow Pack had existed, grown, and protected its members for 5 years without the recognition, support, or grace of the Alpha King. It was that last term that made the room shift uncomfortably. One of the king's generals said it was unnecessary. Serena said, "Then it should cost you nothing to agree." No one had a good answer for that. Kale signed the document on the 3rd day. Serena watched his face while the quill moved. He kept his expression controlled. But she had spent 5 years reading people, and she saw what lived under the control. Not shame exactly, but something close. Something that understood, now, what it had once so easily discarded. She had the document folded and placed inside her coat, close to her chest, not as a wound, as a record. The war took 4 weeks. The rogue coalition had expected resistance. They had not expected Serena. She moved her wolves in ways that did not follow any pattern they had prepared for, because her strategies had been built from scratch without any of the traditional training that made armies predictable. She attacked from directions that made no conventional sense, and were exactly correct. In the 3rd week, Feodravon rode into an ambush he had not seen coming. 3 directions closed around him at once, and for 6 seconds, he was exposed and his guard was scattered. Serena came from the 4th direction. Her wolf form was dark gray, barely visible in the low light, and she moved through the ambush like she had rehearsed it specifically. When it was over, his attackers had retreated, and he was standing in the mud looking at her. She had already shifted back. She stood in front of him, her breathing steady, her expression calm. He said, "Thank you." She nodded once and went back to her wolves. The war ended. The coalition fractured and scattered. The territories held. That night, Serena sat by the fire outside the camp they had set up a mile from the capital. 3 of her wolves had not come home. She sat with that knowledge, the way she had learned to sit with hard things, not avoiding it, not rushing past it, but letting it be exactly as heavy as it was. Petra sat beside her and said nothing. That was one of the things Serena valued most in the people she had built her pack from. They understood when silence was the right thing. Chael found her there an hour later. He came alone, without guards, without ceremony. He sat down across from the fire without asking permission, which she noted. Then he looked at her for a long moment and said, "I need to tell you something." She waited. "At the ceremony," he said, "5 years ago." He looked at his hands. "I knew." The fire cracked between them. "I knew you were the bond," he continued, quietly. "I felt it. Before I spoke, I felt it clearly." He paused. "And I chose not to accept it. Because you were from a disgraced family. Because my court would have called it weakness. Because I was a king who was more afraid of what people thought of his choice than of what the wrong choice would actually cost." He said it simply, with no decoration and no excuse. Just the plain truth, laid out like something he had been carrying for 5 years and was finally setting down. Serena looked at the fire. "I know," she said. He looked up at her. "I knew then," she said. "I could see it. Before you said the words, I saw the decision move across your face. The calculation. I knew exactly what you were choosing and why." She was quiet for a moment. "I just didn't know I would survive it the way I did." The fire moved between them. In the trees, something small and unseen moved through the leaves. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked at him then, really looked, the way she had learned to look at people to understand what was true in them. She saw that he meant it. She also saw that it was not enough, and not because he had not said it well, but because sorry was a small word for a large thing, and she had stopped needing it somewhere around year 3. "I know that too," she said. He nodded slowly. He did not push further. She found herself respecting that more than the apology. In the morning, Serena rode back to Crimson Hollow. Chael had made her an offer before she left. A place at court. A formal role. Everything that came with standing beside the king. He had said it carefully, and without pressure, which told her he had at least learned something. She had listened to the whole offer. Then she had said, "I'll think about it." Which was true. She would. But on the road home, with her 11 remaining wolves riding behind her, and the morning coming up gold over the hills, she felt something settle in her chest that she recognized now because she had worked very hard to build it there. She was not riding toward anything she still needed to prove. She was not running from anything. She was simply going home, to the pack she had made, the territory she had earned, the life she had built from nothing with her own hands. The Crimson Hollow came into view at midday. The ridge first, then the tree line, then the smoke from the chimneys rising straight and steady in the still air. People came out to meet them on the road, older wolves and young ones, children who ran alongside the horses, people she had watched grow in the years she had been building something worth coming back to. She pulled her horse to a stop at the border and looked at it all. 5 years ago, a king had looked at her and decided she was not worth choosing. She had taken that decision and made it the foundation of something he could not have built without her, and would never be able to take credit for. That was not revenge, it was better than revenge. It was proof. She rode home.